Bookmark is brought to you by CIA Amazon. We're wherever you are. And by TikTok. We're an American company. No, really, we promise. And viewers like you. Thank you. Well, hello.
Hi, everybody.
We're back again with another bookmark
Episode of Bookmark.
Yeah, this is episode number 69.
Yeah, it's been a while. Okay, so we need everybody to let us know if you can hear us. You want to go take care of?
Yeah, I think I might have to. That cute little intro. That same little cat is making noise. I need to go see what she's up to.
There's something up with her.
Yeah, she caught a mouse the other day.
And
disemboweled it on our porch. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Disemboweled it on our porch.
Okay. All right. It looks like we're live. Hello, everybody. Please let me know if you can hear me okay. If you can hear us, the chats are open. We love to hear from you. We have a kind of an interesting show today, or an interesting broadcast. There's a couple of different things that we feel are really important that we want to talk about.
Yeah. And we're not going to talk about TikTok, even though they're a sponsor.
Anyway. Yeah, even though they're a sponsor, but they're really American. They really are. That was a really funny intro that you made.
Thank you.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
Can everybody hear us okay? Give us a thumbs up. Let us know if you can hear us. I try not to go through with these broadcasts until I know that everybody can hear us just fine. So let us know, and so we can start. And first of all, the first thing we want to do is say, sorry, I'm doing administrative stuff. I'm trying to do 14 things at one time. So the first thing we want to do is we want to thank Rockfin and Patreon. We want to thank you
Rockfin, for
your continued support. And for those who have donated, thank you for that as well. Sometimes we get, love letters in the mail, and we love that. So thank you for that as well. That always makes our day. We also want to thank the people who have subscribed to the new Substack page that I created a few weeks ago. Hey, Live Alive, thank you. Nice to see you too. Can you hear me okay? I'm kind of sitting far away from the microphone. So if you could let me know if you could hear me, that'd be great. I just need to do a couple of sharing. What's up? You going to Rockfin?
I'm just checking us on Rockfin. Okay. Yeah, we're there. Okay, great. Okay,
so Live Alive says that she can hear me, even though I'm sitting
good.
Somewhat far away from the microphone.
It's not too bad. So, yeah.
We hope everybody is doing good. And surviving this. There's a lot going on, I think. And I think a lot of people are really just kind of, is everything okay over there?
I guess so.
Did she stop?
She stopped. I don't know what she's up to. Okay. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, the minute we go live, she starts, meow, starts crying. And we're like, oh no. Yeah. We're like the doting parents over here with our cat. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we got a show to do, Roxy. Just chill.
Right? Yeah, we have a show to do. All right, so let me just share it one more time. So why don't you, while I share this, you start out with the first topic?
Okay.
And it begins with although.
Yeah, we have notes here. So the national emergency has been announced, and we've known about this for a while. It was announced a couple months ago that on May 11th, the national emergency is ending, and everybody's like, yay, but not so fast, because, as you know, things always replace other things, right?
Mm.
So any future emergency authorizations will be now announced by the FDA. And the reason we say that is because a couple things, but this now signals the unelected committees or agencies that will dictate autonomous existence. And so basically we're having our elected officials removed from those official capacities through laws and through legislation. Laws, the same thing. Legislation that undermines your representative democracy. And we're now getting the agencies where people are appointed taking over those roles. And the FDA, now you're going to have to tell me, I can't remember exactly how it is that the FDA has now become the agency du jour for these announcements.
That's what the HHS wrote in their
Okay.
So the HHS wrote a blog, and you guys are perfectly capable of going and reading about these things yourself, because I do, and I'm no expert
Well,
at anything, and so I think everybody could. But
so this is, I guess what you're trying to say is we're not speculating about this. It's out there on the blog.
Well, by my interpretation through the memo that the Health and Human Services posted on their own site, my interpretation of it, and I believe it was called something like the transition into post-COVID emergency authorization ending. Okay, so they want to figure out how to transition from the fact that the national emergency will no longer be announced by the president. They want to figure out how to transition from that into something else. And so they mentioned, from based on what I read in my interpretation, that the FDA, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Administration, would be the agency that would announce future national emergencies. So, so it would now be rolled into the agency that nobody really elected. So, we know that the powers that be and our alleged elected officials that run this country and manage us, we know that they're paid by corporate sponsors. We know that they should all be wearing patches of the various corporate, entities that control them. And so, but just for the sake of, looking like we still live in a functioning republic or a democracy, looking like it, they made it so that the president of the United States would be the one to continue to renew the national emergency for COVID response over the last 3 years. And so they made it look like it was this, democratically elected official that was making those renewal announcements every 90 days. Well, now they're basically taking lifting the veil, taking the mask off, and saying, no, we're just going to have an unelected agency decide when you can go to work, when your kids can go to school, whether you wear a mask or not. We're going to have an unelected agency that is comprised of people that represent the interests of the Bank of International Settlements and the various central banks and the corporations. We're going to have those people dictating what you do as a human slave.
Well, I think
so. It's inching closer to slavery.
Yeah, and actual fascism.
Yeah.
Well, we did see the beginnings of this when Trump was in office and the national emergency was declared 3 years ago, this month, 3 years ago. And he handed over some power to FEMA during this period. Yeah. And there was, we showed a video of that in one of our videos. I forget which one that was, but
probably deconstruction.
Yeah, probably. And it was the weirdest damn thing to watch.
He was really, there was all sorts of speculation about his body language. He had his arms crossed across him, which is when you look at body language, that means, I don't like what think of little children who don't like to be told what to do. You know, they cross their arms across their body, they stamp their feet, and he was sitting really far away from anyway, there's a whole breakdown of body language in some of these videos that people have watched where he is handing power over to FEMA back in 2020, back in March of 2020.
But the weird thing is they didn't really do anything. I mean, it was really the HHS that was kind of felt like they were more in control of
well, even on FEMA's own website. So you would go to the FEMA website, and I talked about this in a video that I did called Let's Tutorial. I'm like, let's learn something today. So I went to the FEMA website, and it went from FEMA to another website that was all about business. It was all about business interests. You know, in the interest of business, we're doing this or that. So you know, and nothing having to do with health, of course.
Right. So well, that was the funding stream that went out there into the business sector. So that's why Walmart and Costco could stay open, but your mom and pop shop down the street could not.
So here we are, getting ready to celebrate for the fact that the national emergency for COVID response is officially will never be renewed by the President of the United States ever again. It's officially ending on May 11th. But if you're not paying attention and you're not reading what the HHS has to say about this, you're not understanding that it's just a rehoming of power into an unelected agency. Now, is this scary? I mean, we don't live in fear and we don't live in trauma. So on paper, yeah, it's really scary on paper because, you know, it sets a precedence, right? But the reality of your life is that you probably won't experience, you know, any kind of disruption to, you know, your life. But the fact that it's there and the fact that it could is enough for people to start writing legislation. It's enough for people to start filing lawsuits, and people really are. They really, truly are. And so people are paying attention. Enough people are paying attention, and enough regular people like me and you are simply going about our life, and we're acting. The best way to not give in to your enemy is to not give them your supply. So don't respond, don't react. Say, I don't know anything about it. I don't know what FDA, what are you talking about? Like I have to go stand over there now,
right.
You know?
Well, you know, and so like I'm gonna back up a little bit and going back to like what you said. I mean, these are all these things are being put into place to create precedents, right? To create
a precedent.
Yeah, and legal statutes, whatever, whether they're an actual law or they are language that allows the next law to come into place, okay, that then allows them to do the next drastic thing. So along the lines of what you were saying, you probably won't feel it now, but in the future, something might happen and you're like, hey, wait a minute, that's not constitutional.
Exactly.
Well, actually, it is, because we've banned the Constitution.
Actually, you know, that's actually like an incredible example. You know, I'm so glad you brought that up because check it out. In the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, Obama made it legal to target and disappear American citizens outside of due process, meaning that the police, and honestly, people, it happened to me, meaning that the police can come to you and arrest you, but never charge you with anything and keep you in a place, whether it's jail or a black site, or even keep you in your own home and incarcerate you in your own home, but you've never been charged with anything. That's what operating outside of due process means, is that they can say, well, we're going to arrest you, but we're not going to charge you. Well, what are you arresting me for? Well, there's a whole litany of reasons why we're arresting you, but we're not officially charging you. So, like JP just said, you know, something happens now and in the future it could come back to haunt us.
Mhm.
Well, that's exactly what happened in 2012 with the signing of the National Defense Authorization Act, which included the language to target and disappear American citizens outside of due process. Here we are in 2023, and there are, from what I understand, about 1,000 people that are being held, locked down for 3 years now without charges, outside of due process, and yet they've been arrested. So they're either under house arrest, they're either in jail, or they're somewhere else.
Right.
So that's where the past has caught up with us, and we're seeing that roll out right now. So if you're not paying attention to the rehoming of the EUAs, which is the emergency use authorization language that was coming out of the president's White House and is now rehomed into the FDA, if you're not paying attention to that, then don't be surprised if 3 years or 5 years or 10 years down the road, they do something really drastic, like say that, having an itchy toe means that everybody in the world needs to lock down, and nobody fights it now. So it's gonna,
right. And
it's
they're doing a lot of weird things in infrastructure funding and things like that will allow for whatever. So a lot of the sewage infrastructure is being replaced and updated and upgraded in a lot of places, especially here in McKees Rocks. They're going to do that in Pittsburgh in general. And we've heard about how they've been announcing, like back in the COVID period, how much they were going to use, like they were using the sewage to monitor illnesses and sickness out in the it's like, oh, there's we found in the sewage that there's an outbreak of X, whatever the disease du jour.
Well,
right?
That's actually a really good thing that you brought that up, because this idea of monitoring sewage. So just as we're finding out about the national defense or the national emergency for COVID response, or the EUAs ending, we learned from the HHS that not only are they folding that power into the FDA, like I've mentioned about a million times so far, but they've also opened up to two new agencies. And so piggybacking on what you just said about the monitoring of your health through like your wastewater systems, the HHS is opening up an office called the Environmental Justice Office and the Health Equity Office.
Right.
Or two offices. They're opening up those two offices.
These are two like serious buzzwords.
And how do I know this? Because I listened to the secretary of the HHS say so.
Right. And so environmental justice is something, that we've been hearing about for probably at least, since the 2016 election. And I think the first time I heard it was the Green Party campaign. Dr. Now I can't even think of her name. Jill Stein was talking about it, right? And so they were going around to places in the country where, politicians just don't go.
Right.
And so I think there's something legitimate to the idea of environmental justice. But what happens is that stuff gets pulled up from like grassroots, actual, authentic concerns, and gets used against the population. So, all this BS, like, so the whole kerfuffle around like the Ohio train derailment and the explosion and dioxin and all this like stuff. And we hear from Dr. Lee Merritt. She's like, I went through the chemistry here and I can see that, she's whatever.
Yeah.
She's like, it's no worse than what you burn in your backyard.
Right. Basically.
Right. And so that was like this big, like, hey, pay attention to this, pay attention to this. In the meantime, not 30 minutes away from that spill or that train derailment, okay, not even 30 minutes away from that, is something that's in our backyard. I mean, not literally, but it's maybe 20 minutes away from here, 20, 30 minutes away from here. And that is this thing called the cracker plant. And
not cracker, like saltine crackers.
Not saltines. No. This is not the snack cracker plant. This
no.
My daddy's a big wheel at the cracker plant.
Tell us what you mean.
The cracker plant is actually it's a plastic manufacturing plant, and it's run by Shell Oil. And we had a guy here helping us out putting in some
tile for our house.
Yeah, we had some tile laid, and he lives literally. It is in his backyard.
It is in his backyard. He was showing pictures. He's like, "This is what I get to see every night."
Well, at least once a month.
Yeah.
So when they have a buildup of whatever, they release that, and he said he showed me these photos. He showed us these photos, and it was just like an explosion in the sky. It was like bright.
And so the buildup of all these toxins of these
released.
Plastics that's basically run by Shell Oil outside of this guy's backyard. Once a month, he gets to watch them release those toxins into the atmosphere. So where's the EPA and where's the governor of Pennsylvania and where's all of your environmental activists for this thing that's run by Shell Oil? Right.
And
that's happening all the time.
Right.
Like, and there's so many things going on outside of these disasters. Right.
Well, the disasters are there to distract you. And they're so like what we heard the other day, I forget who was saying it, but like, they allow for an amount of truth to come out. Okay. Here and there. So there's always some truth that is associated with whatever.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've been saying
story.
That for years.
Yeah. But then, it's there to distract you from the actual shit. So, in flyover country, in Trump country, where nobody cares, nobody liberal who cares about environmental issues, they're more concerned about something called climate change. When actuality, pollution is the issue, and I've said that over and over again for the last 4 or 5 years or more. Pollution is the issue, not carbon.
And
so let me finish. And toxins. Let me finish what I was going to say is that this cracker plant, they applied for an easement of some kind to release more hydrocarbons than they would normally do under normal circumstances. They got that permit, but they go over that all the time with these eruptions, and it's just a fine of a couple $100,000. That's chump change for an oil company.
Right. So they'll just pay the fine.
And yet at the same time, these people are being poisoned slowly. And these eruptions are going up into the sky, and who knows what the fuck is in that. And that's on a daily, or that's on a monthly basis, not just this little explosion that they blew up a train car, just to distract you. Okay.
That's a distraction.
So they're telling you that shit's going on in flyover country that's environmentally harmful to the people, to the residents of that area, but they're not telling you that it's happening all the time. They're saying, "Oh, this is a an isolated event."
Right. So that's the key point right there, is that it's happening all the time.
Right.
So one of the things that I'm constantly trying to remind people, because I'm noticing that more and more and more, I'm seeing an escalation of sort of hair on fire hysteria, especially on social media, which I've coined as user nation, is don't pay attention to what's going on in the media and how angry these stories make you. Walk outside your front door, look on your map, find out where the closest factory is, and go to the residents that live around that factory and take a look at them. Are they sick all the time? Is their hair falling out? Is there a concentration of cancer or health issues that seem to be concentrated in this particular area? That's a sign of these ongoing toxic issues, which, stories like the East Palestine train derailment will distract you from. And also another story that just came out, the Reading, Pennsylvania chocolate factory. Yeah. I told somebody that I actually think that the chocolate factory is probably not even in operation, and that it's just a big story to distract you from, other shit that, like our friend Elaine said, is geez, PA. Like practically every county in the state of Pennsylvania is just riddled with some sort of toxic element. Right. It's incredible.
So Elaine says Philly water contamination is currently happening. Yeah, Pennsylvania is a messed up place.
Pennsylvania is really messed up. So I would say that there's a lot going on to capture you on social media or in user nation, but I think what's really important is to focus on what's going on right outside your
Yeah.
front door.
Right.
There's a lot of neighborhoods in Pennsylvania that are basically just riddled with sinkholes, and there's flooding and wastewater that rises up. I mean, this is like 19th century, 18th century issues.
Not
You know,
18th,
okay,
but
19th, early 19th century issues, right?
well,
That
early 20th,
whatever,
late 19th.
19th century, 20th century issues that we should not be dealing with. We should not be with all the money that comes into this country
Mhm.
and the tax base that we
Mhm.
have in this country. Why are we still living in neighborhoods that have sinkholes and rising wastewater?
Right.
Like, this isn't
So the money, so as I was saying
early
before, like,
England.
right,
Come
right, yeah.
on.
So the money that's being put into like these wastewater facilities and the infrastructure is not going to help people ultimately. It's there for more surveillance, or it's there to make money,
Mhm.
right, for whoever's, you know, putting it together. And it's not going to fix much. It's just going to, you know, basically create jobs that will then spend money that people make money with, and you know, the money gets spent around, and but it doesn't help the communities. I think is what I'm getting at. It doesn't help the communities that these things are taking place in. The money it goes up, right?
Yeah, it always
You
goes
know?
up.
Yeah.
It always goes to services that are what David Graeber, go ahead and look him up. He died a few years ago, but what he called like a bullshit job. He has a book called Bullshit Jobs.
Yeah.
And you know, basically the wraparound services that are pretty much managed by the tech sector. For instance, if you're on like, you know, some sort of food assistance or in Section 8, those tech services that, you know, develop the apps so that the residents can log into they get the money.
Right.
Like they get all
Right.
the great funding
And
from
it
the
just keeps
government.
the people in the program.
And basically it just keeps the people in the
Yeah,
program.
right.
So another thing I want to like just kind of throw in here, it doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about, but I feel like it's important to say, and then we can move on into the like the weaponization of weather and things like that.
Okay.
Is context.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not sure how to apply the context here in this case, but
Well, that's why I said it's not really about what we're
okay,
talking about.
But yeah,
It's kind of a curveball thrown into this conversation.
Sure.
So in general, in life, nobody is who they are because that's who they are. There's always something else that is attached to what they say or how they behave. And there's always context. You have to include context into every conversation that you have with your family, your friends, social media. You don't know the history, whether it's immediate history or long ago history that makes people the way that they are. So context is a human experience, a part of the human experience, a concept that has been removed in modern day culture. It feels like context has been removed because of the, you know, invention of social media. We're in this constant place of immediacy, right? So with context, you have to stop, take time, go back and say and analyze and say, okay, is this person really a psychopath, or are they just responding to the fact that they grew up in a household that withheld affection or withheld support? Are they? And so this would explain why they're a psychopath. You know, there's a couple of examples of context. Scott Adams, you know, he's the creator of Dilbert. His whole career imploded. I'm sure you've seen it somewhat here and there on the mainstream, you know, news sources. His comic strip Dilbert was pulled from the Washington Post, from the New York Times, from everywhere you could possibly think of, because he was accused of being a racist.
Right. He allegedly said something racist, and like it's gotten to the point where even like you look it up on if you look him up on Wikipedia, it says because he said something racist.
Right.
Well, that was never established, right? So there's your lack of context in that situation, right? They don't say allegedly or was accused of, because
Or was
that's more
accused of being racist, and here's
that's
the
more
context by which why he
right,
was
because
accused.
they didn't put the quote that he's being accused of saying, right? So whether he's guilty or not, they didn't put the quote in, so there's your context, and they also didn't say that he was accused of. That would be more accurate. What they said was, and they just pulled complete context out of the situation. What the Wikipedia entry said was he said something racist, right?
So we can,
And so, like, okay, well, what did he say? What did he
right,
say?
right. So Wikipedia is like
Yeah, I
the
mean, it's
king of like lack of context,
right. Yeah.
right? So I think we all know that Wikipedia is so
It's suspect.
it's not real. Like
Yeah.
it just leaves so much. It leaves big, huge, gaping holes.
I always have to, when I read it,
know.
I always have to, take into account
which is adding context
right
to something.
what's going on and reading between the lines, which is again adding context. This is something that people who are in like communist Eastern Europe in the communist days had to do all the time. They always looked at their news sources with suspect, with a
with
degree
suspicion,
yeah.
Yeah.
And that they had
and
a grain of salt, and more than that, they probably had a whole pound of salt to go with that, right?
Yeah.
And so, what we're seeing in, all the news, and I'm talking about all the media, and that's the reason they call it media, right? Because it's mediated. Your message is, what's being said to you is being mediated, right? Even we are mediating to some degree. But what we're trying to do here is look at the issues and talk around them rather than just tell you what is and what ain't, and without any sort of,
and we're not
background.
Here to be your echo chamber,
right.
and all that
but
stuff.
the whether it's Fox News or CNN, you got to pay attention to what it is they're saying and why they're saying it, and why all of a sudden are all the media sources saying the same thing about a given situation. Because generally it used to be where you'd get like maybe different stories or different aspects of the story. Now it's just all lockstep. And when that happens, that something's up, that you're not getting the whole story. You're only maybe even getting half truth or not even the full truth.
Right.
In a lot of cases.
It's true. Yeah. I want to talk about the other example of context, because I feel kind of bad for these people. I may not agree with everything that they say.
No.
And I'm, but I feel really bad because a couple of them, if not all of them, and I'm talking about Christiane Northrup, Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Carrie Madej, Dr. Lawrence Palevsky, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, and Dr. Lee Merritt, right? So they received a letter from one of their fans that said, "How dare you laugh at people who have died?" Okay. And it was so weird because they don't laugh at people who died. What happened was the individual was watching their show and happened to be bringing their like liberal family members, I guess, in to watch the show as well. And they just caught the doctors at a time when they were responding to a joke that Roseanne Barr had said, who's kind of making a weird comeback in a strange way. And so this person just sent them this really scathing letter and took everything out of context. And I'm thinking to myself, man, does this person who wrote them not realize that they've all lost their careers? They've all lost their medical license. Well, I don't think Tenpenny has. I think that she still has her medical license, or they've simply walked away from the medical establishment by choice altogether and choose to go more of a homeopathic route. Does this person know that they've had to reinvent themselves? Can you imagine having being that age, older in life, much older in life, and literally having to reinvent yourself in order to survive? I just felt like, man, it deserved some kind of attention and an example of how dangerous it is not to take things into context. You have to apply that critical thinking skill, which is what context is, right? It's a critical thinking skill. You have to apply that skill to every conversation, even with me. Like, why did she say this? Well, think about who I am and, my background, and take it into
I'm always
context.
doing that.
Take it into context. What are you talking about? So
no, because I live with you, and so I'm always having. That's the joke. That's sorry. See, even
The-
humor requires context.
yeah, but the reality of the situation is that the two of us get along really well. We sometimes are even mistaken for brother and sister. Like, that's how well we get along. Like, we just get along really well.
Yeah.
For the most part. He likes to joke around a lot, but we do. So I want to talk about too the weaponization of weather, especially with what happened in Rolling Fork, Mississippi.
Oh boy. Okay.
So for context, Rolling Fork, Mississippi is 4 hours north of Biloxi,
which is on the coast.
And which is a coastal town.
And it's about a half hour from Jackson, which is I think the
state capital.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to talk about repentance in a minute. We're not sure, like Natasha, fill us in, because we didn't quite get to that part. Was she talking about like repentance in general, or was she talking about the people who accused them of laughing at dead people or something needed to repent? Like I don't want to go down the wrong path. I want to make sure that
we kind of stopped watching it at that point.
Well, we didn't have time.
Yeah,
we just, we're busy. And, but I did think that particular section of that episode was really important. How that fan who wrote them that sad letter had not taken it into context. So Rolling Fork, Mississippi, I don't know if you guys knew, but they're have undergone some devastating damage from a tornado.
Yeah. So all the weather people are baffled by where did this come from? And this same thing happened about the same period of time in California, down in where was that? It was in Southern California.
Oh yeah.
There was a report. There was a video of
that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Natasha, for explaining what she meant by repentance.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was it? I forget the name of the town.
I will find out because I actually wrote about it.
Yeah. So it was weird. So around the same period of time, right? There was this video of this tornado that occurred in California, and it would look like just like trash running, or like a dust devil. Sure, Southern California had Montebello. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Brooke.
I grew up down there, and we'd get little dust devils now and then, but you'd never have a tornado, right? You just wouldn't get tornadoes. And this was it took out some buildings and caused some damage, right? And it just came out of nowhere, and then it went away. And tornadoes kind of do erupt out of nowhere, but generally it's, a tornado is a very specific type of weather condition where there's, lots of hot and cold, or lots of, it's just a very a volatile weather condition. That's why there's certain parts of the country that get them, right? So Oklahoma is notorious for having tornadoes, Texas as well. And, up into the Midwest, like Kansas, and you remember the story of Dorothy, Julie? So, there's certain, there's certain areas of the country that get them, but Southern California is not one of them. But anyway, so that came up out of nowhere. And then this one in Mississippi just popped up out of nowhere. They know when a tornado is going to be, when the conditions are right for tornadoes. That's why they put tornado watch or tornado warnings out in time for, this action to take place, or to people to, prepare for it. But this didn't happen. It just kind of came out of nowhere, and there were no conditions that said, that gave them any pause to say, warning, a tornado is coming into your area, or could
have 48 hours to vacate your home,
or 12 hours, or whatever the case may be, right?
Right.
There was no warning. There was no.
Same thing with the Montebello as well.
Right. Same thing with Montebello.
Let's talk about the demographics of Montebello and Rolling Fork.
Okay. Well, do you know the demographics of Montebello?
You told me.
Well, I mean, it's a Southern California town.
It's a Southern California town, and it's like a factory town. right?
No, I think it's more suburban.
Um,
I always remember just hearing. I've never been there. I grew up in.
so right here it says it's not very residential.
Oh, okay.
And you told me that it or what was affected were like infrastructure
Okay.
that was part of the supply chain.
All right.
Hmm.
So just a diversion here.
Mhm.
You know, a year ago, there were a bunch of food processing plants that were burning all of a sudden.
Remember that, guys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so all of a sudden there were fires all over the country, and they affected supply chain. And then like we were talking about Ohio, the train derailment. Suddenly there were train derailments everywhere, and that kind of affects the supply chain. And then we have a chocolate factory explode, which
right,
chocolate, right? Whatever.
And then someone else said something else that had exploded. Like it's just like it's the season for whatever.
Yeah. So this is we're entering tornado and explosion season apparently. It's explosion season. It's tornado season. It's explosion season. It's tornado. Anyway. Right. So
same kind of hype.
Yeah. Or that argument with Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny. Right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
Yeah.
That one. Wish we had a
I know.
GIF of that.
I should have done that. Anyway,
we could like recreate it.
Right.
Would you be Donald Duck or would I be Donald Duck?
I don't care. Donald Duck? We wouldn't be either of those.
I'm sorry. Would you be Daffy Duck and then I would be?
Yeah, I get kind of upset sometimes like him. So
who? So it was Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny.
Mm-hmm.
You would be Bugs Bunny. Then,
rabbit season.
Yeah, because you're the rabbit.
Season. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, that's a diversion too. Don't look at this. Anyway, so then we get these tornadoes, and lo and behold, it hits this part of Mississippi, the poorest, one of, if not the poorest state in the nation, hitting a specifically very poor and not very populated area, agrarian kind of, farm community.
Yeah.
And yet it looks like the whole state has been devoured by a tornado.
I know. So this little area in Mississippi, like we said, it's so if you think of Mississippi, there's a coastal line there, and it's from Gulfport, Mississippi, all the way to Ocean Springs. Is that, or does it go even further?
Well, it goes further, but yeah.
But anyway, so then if you just go straight up into the state itself, you've got Rolling Fork, and then Jackson, Mississippi, which is the state capital is right by Rolling Fork.
Mm-hmm.
In Rolling Fork, nobody makes more than like say $25,000 a year, which is below the poverty line. And about 70% of the population is Black. And how many people live in Rolling Fork, Mississippi? About 1,800. Less than 2,000 people live there. So if you were to look at the Associated Press, NPR, New York Times, Washington Post, even your own newsfeed, where general people who you've never seen before are suddenly showing you all these photos, of great devastation. You would think that the entire state of Mississippi is like destroyed, like a war zone. It's not really that, and then that's not really the case. It's a very small portion of the population. So I wrote like a 1.5 minute piece on my Substack page, because I'm not into writing long pieces, that said, all right, so what 2 things will benefit as a result of this weather weaponization? Because we don't believe really that weather is real anymore. We think it's used, instead of dropping bombs on us, we believe that the military is working with sort of like geoengineering scientists, like out of Harvard. And so they're weaponizing weather to target individuals, which you're allowed to do now under the National Defense Authorization Act. So this is a weaponization of weather. This was not a natural occurrence. And so let's talk about the 2 industries that will benefit from removing these people from Rolling Fork, Mississippi. I imagine they're going to take this empty little town, which doesn't really have anything going on, and they will load it up with some kind of toxic industry, which will get tons of money from the government, maybe about a dozen people or so will work in this toxic industry, make a ton of money, and the government will fund it, but it's so toxic, you can't have human beings there. Well, that's okay, because what's going to happen in 2 months? You're going to lose your funding stream from the COVID response. So the national emergency is ending
in May.
Okay. It's ending in May. So that's why you've got Biden running up to the pulpit and the governor of Mississippi running up to the pulpit saying, the podium. I know. It's like all this religious talk. We're going to get into that in a minute too. But running up into the podium and saying, okay, it's a national emergency or it's a state emergency for the state of Mississippi, because they know that that national emergency funding stream is drying up. So they're going to recreate another emergency. And they're going to take those 1,800 people who are now displaced, move them probably to Jackson, which is like, hey, come on in. We just opened up a 15-minute city. And you can move into these tiny little apartments where you can live in this concrete life, and you can have your food benefits, and you can have your housing benefits, and you can have your infrastructure all packed in, and you can just get all packed in nice and tight. Okay. And that's how they do it. So now you've got, this tornado that rolled through Rolling Fork, Mississippi, that has flattened every building there that was once housed by people to make room for something else. And believe me, it's not going to be something pretty like a park or a Trader Joe's. It's not going to be like that, or cool homes or apartments. It's probably going to be some kind of toxic industry. Okay. And then those people will then be displaced in Section 8 housing, which is basically a 15-minute infrastructure that's been around for, decades already. And they're going to be displaced into Section 8 housing in Jackson, Mississippi, in kind of a very urban environment.
This is our speculation, because we live in the same kind of environment here, where
Right.
It's the most Section 8 housing, if not the state of Pennsylvania, at least the county of Allegheny. And it's a very concentrated place where the Section 8 people have been sent to. And it creates a lack of a sense of community. There's no sense of place. Nobody has any roots here.
Right.
And so it keeps people dispersed, but also dependent.
Right.
And so, if they go to Jackson, that's a possibility. They could also send them somewhere else where they already have that infrastructure set up. But it seems most likely that Jackson is the place, right?
Jackson will be the place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's the major city that's probably already received funding for such a thing. So one thing you need to understand about these city centers that have, these concentration of public housing or Section 8 housing is in order to keep them going and keep the funding stream going, they need the people. They need the people there to occupy the spaces so that they can demand that the government give them more money, because they need to create more infrastructure for the people. So it's this constant loop. It's like the snake eating its own tail. It's a constant loop of need. And as people were getting more and more aware of how cannibalizing these government programs are, they were figuring out ways to exist outside of the government and outside of it. And the government and all the marketing agencies that the government uses to surveil where the people are psychologically knew this. Thus, we have COVID. And so a great reset had to take place. And then people had to, and a great financial collapse had to take place in order to force the people to go back into the programs that would cannibalize them, right? So that's kind of the philosophical reason why I believe we had the COVID operation and the COVID reset. I also think that let's go back to Reading, PA. So something that you had said that's really important. And actually, it's very crucial if you really care about like this country and you care about your community and all this, you need to think about what it means to have a history and, memories and long-standing relationships that go back generations,
So
right?
strong social ties,
Strong
family
social
ties.
ties. What's happening is they want to break up all those social ties and those strong family ties. They really want to disintegrate those into nothing. So here's what I think happened in Reading, PA, when we were told that a chocolate factory exploded. I think Reading, PA, which again isn't a very well-off community, right?
It has a university there, but it's not really,
And what do universities represent? They represent a revolving door of individuals that have no place. It's not like people who go to the university there have grandparents who went to that university or have, strong family ties
No,
there.
yeah, you generally have, townies and
Universities
or whatever.
in general, universities typically represent people coming to that university from another place, go to that university, leave that university area and go move somewhere else, and they get the education and they leave.
Here's something I don't know. I haven't been to Reading, so I'm not really, sure of this. But based on my travel across the country when I was moving our stuff from California to Pennsylvania, in Indiana at least, I could tell when there was a university town. I guess in a couple other states too. But like in the Midwest, I could tell when I was going into a university town because the infrastructure and the streets and everything was much nicer. There was more money there,
right?
In general,
I was,
the poor side of town is probably more poor.
Okay, well, on that, but I want to finish my point about this sort of revolving door sense of, or the lack of the sense of place. But, to piggyback on what you were just saying, I was telling a recent friend in San Francisco that in Pittsburgh, which is where the University of Pittsburgh is and where Carnegie Mellon University is and where Duquesne University is, in Pittsburgh, like for instance, if you are walking down the major street where the University of Pennsylvania is, it's all gleaming and new and beautiful. And then just around the corner, it's like a third world country or a developing country, I should say, to use the proper language. It's like a developing country. It looks like bombs were dropped. Like it's the buildings are all blighted. The streets are all rubbled out, but right by the university, it's perfect. But what I was saying about this lack of a sense of place is that when we heard about the Reading, Pennsylvania chocolate factory explosion, the people that live around there have not lived around there for generations. Had they lived around there and this story came out, and had you had generations of people there, you may have had people say, what are you talking about? That factory has been closed for 5 years. But because there's no sense of place and nobody pays attention and everybody's lives are stretched so thin and everybody's here and there, and maybe, it's mostly filled with renters who've only been there for 6 months, how can they argue with the story? It's like, oh, that place. Oh, I didn't know that.
The only person I ever knew from Reading, Pennsylvania lives in the Bay Area. So, there's not, so who knows, how tightly knit the community is.
So when you hear these stories, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the demographic like? Is there a lot of changeover? Is there a lot of, look at the rental demographic. And then once you find out that it's 95% renters, take that, percentage and break it apart and say how much of that is Section 8, where Section 8 is a revolving door. Like people in Section 8, they don't stay in their area, in their units very long because they're always looking for the better unit. It's usually a placeholder for them. So there's no sense of place. There's no sense of history or feeling beholden to the neighborhood or the area because nobody's from there. So you could say anything you want. You could say anything in the world and nobody would be able to argue with you because nobody's from there.
Right. And, and even if they do, nobody is basically asking those people. Right. Those voices do not get heard as a result of, mediation. Again, context, lack of context in the media. So the media does not pay attention to that. They only pay attention to what they want you to hear, what they want you to see. And can I back up just real quick
Yeah,
about
sure.
talking about like context and media and mediation
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
of
yeah.
information? Because I wanted to say this before, but I forgot. And that is that, in User Nation, on social media and in the news, right? What they're showing you could be anything, right? And a lot of times what we see on Twitter or Facebook, and probably even TikTok or whatever, is footage that's taken from years prior, but it's being presented in a context of now. And it's being presented in a context of, oh my God, there's this trend going on. Young black men are beating up white people, right? In the middle of Black History Month in February, right? That was a trending thing. But you go to look into some of these videos and they're not current.
They're not current.
But
They're from
being,
like 2015.
right.
One
and,
was even like 20 years old.
Right. And so they're bringing these things together, releasing them out, you see, and allowing people to draw conclusions based on what they're seeing as opposed to what is actually going on, which is nothing. So as we say, step outside and see what's happening. Don't be frightened by what you see on the screen.
Exactly.
That's just one example. But like, these other things that we're talking about, train derailments and explosions. And it's like, well, okay, if you look at the whole country, you have 3 or 4 isolated events, which make it seem like the whole country is exploding, right? That's not really necessarily the case. When those food processing plants were burning, we speculated that they were probably already out of service, or they were planning to put them out of service in the first place. So they weren't going to have an effect on the supply chain, but that was the narrative that was being supported, right? And so you have to look at these things in that frame of reference, and you have to understand that, why is it we're seeing these things? You have to ask yourself that question. Why is it when we're seeing all these things at the same time? Did these things actually happen? And if they happened, why? Right? Why is it? And we don't get that. We don't get those reasons. It's just like all the deaths that have been, reported of celebrities and people, that you may know in a community. No frame of reference around cause of death. Never. Why is that? Right?
Right.
Why is that?
Right.
So this explosion, they said people died. And just like with other things that have happened over the years, from the Las Vegas shootings to, a synagogue in Pittsburgh to this thing. Do you know who those people are? Do the people in the community know who those people are? I doubt it. I have a feeling that most of the people that are reported as dead or killed by these things, and it sounds heartless, I know, but I don't think they exist. I think they're personas for the most part. There may have been 1 or 2 deaths. There may have been some injuries. Who knows? We're not being told the whole story, so you have no frame of reference. There's no place to
There's no context.
There's no context. I remember after the Las Vegas shooting, NPR ran all these pictures of these people that were allegedly killed. Okay. Do they exist? I have a feeling they were personas. They looked like, the faces all looked like, like ordinary people that you see every day, right? But they could have been composites.
Right.
Because that's a
You know how easy
that's a
it is?
technology that exists, right?
You know how easy it
So
is to
they
do
could have
now?
been composite images of people, made up names, made up stories, and they were all these like lovely people. They donated to dog protections, and they were adopted dogs, and they did all these things, and they loved life, and they did this and they did that, and it was all these like positive stories. There was not one story about like they were a deplorable person and nobody liked them. Well, who wants to hear that news anyway? But right, they're not going to say that. But what I guess I'm getting at is they were all these like people that you would hold up in high regard. They weren't just ordinary people, right? The stories were just like beyond belief. And so when we start seeing, and it was just like over the top, it just felt really inauthentic.
Right.
It really
and
did.
Every day AI gets better and better. So you could go back to old events and you can see the photos or even videos of people, and you can be like, wow, I can't believe I fell for that. Like
Mhm.
I can make that stuff right now with our video making skills, right?
Well, Elaine, I think
So-
that anxiety is a problem out in the world right now because of mediation of stories that are coming through, either the news or social media, and nobody's checking outside the front door.
Right.
They're not actually, they hear that there's wind and rain happening outside in their community, but they go outside and it's sunny. Right. That's an
Look, I talked about this in one of
I'm not that's not a real thing. I'm just saying it's like that's an example. That's like an
in one of our
exaggerated
very
example.
earliest video essays. I talked about how there will come a time, I didn't realize it would only be 3 years later, but there will come a time when you're incapable of, of acknowledging reality,
Mhm.
because your screens will tell you what the truth is.
So
So I want to address something that Kate Gowan
mhm.
commented on about 10 minutes ago. I wanted to let
Okay,
you
yeah,
finish.
come back to it.
So the national emergency for COVID response, as declared by the President of the United States, is officially ending on May 11th, 2023. But a separate emergency declaration pursuant to Section 564 of the FDA, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or the FDNC, was issued by the Secretary of the HHS in February of 2020. So moving on, the timing to conclude the EUA is May 11th, 2023. But there are other emergencies based on the PrEP Act. And so it gets very confusing. But ultimately, the bottom line is that further emergency authorizations will be placed into an unelected agency. Okay. The president of the United States is no longer going to be making these declarations on the White House's website, like I've been following along every 90 days since March 13th of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So they won't be on the White House anymore. It'll be through an unelected agency, whether it's HHS, whether it's the FDA. Now, 10 amendments to the declarations have been issued to extend liability protections related to COVID-19 countermeasures. All right. And so for a PrEP Act emergency determination, the Secretary of the HHS must specify an end date. And in this case, that is October 1st, 2024. So I'd have to read into this a little bit more, but I do believe that liability protections for COVID-19 countermeasures, the liability protections for the people that are doing the bad stuff so that you can't sue them, is extended out to October 1st, 2024. And I imagine that after that, it will be extended again. So there is a little bit of confusion. Some people are like, no, it's not ending. It's continuing. It's just going to be called something else. Well, yes and no.
One thing is going to end and another is going to take its place.
Right.
Basically.
But yes and no.
Yeah, I know. Right.
So it's like,
well, and it's deliberate. That's deliberate.
Nothing is ever black and white. Right. Everything is in this weird, chaotic gray area. And so where am I getting this from? I'm getting it from Kaiser, kff.org. And they call it countermeasures. So, you're looking at a military program.
Right. They're using the military language, aren't they? Right. They're not calling them vaccines, are they?
And with the military, and I have relatives who are in the military and they can speak on this. Things are never, ever easy. Things are complicated and weird. And there's a lot of box checking and a lot of BS that you have to go through to get to the various, levels or whatever. It's not so cut and dry. And I think that that's part of the problem with dealing with people is people need black and white. They need, they need absolute crystal clear truth. And unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And it's never been the world we live in, but even more so now.
Mhm.
Even more so
I think
now.
the only reason,
Thanks to the military being
yeah,
involved.
I think, okay, so, we used to be, I mean, humans are meaning seekers, right? We are always looking for meaning, and we're storytellers too. We haven't been about black and white facts until pretty recently in our history, probably in the last 75 years, since maybe World War II, because that's when you started seeing the news coming out and saying we are factually based, and we are whatever. There, before that, the news was like they'd say anything, right?
Mhm.
Hearst made a living.
Mhm.
He became a wealthy man by
He started
telling
a war
lies.
by writing an article.
Exactly, right? The news was not to be trusted back then.
Yeah.
And so after World War II, it was like it became this thing, and so and science became more important, and authority became more important. From the standpoint of trust your doctor, and trust the the news sources, and trust your government, and that kind of thing. So I don't think that we have been led to believe in so-called facts and truth, especially in the media and from authority figures, when that's not really what's going on, right?
Mhm.
And so I looked at somebody's LinkedIn profile the other day, and
Why?
I actually worked with this person, right?
Oh, okay.
And it said that she was evidence based. Okay, she was fully about evidence based, right? And yet she was fully on board with the COVID narrative. She was fully on board with some other bullshit, and so this is also a lie. Evidence based is a phrase that people say, just like I believe in science, when science is about asking questions, science is about investigation, science is about using your intuition to make a leap of logic and say, I wonder if I can prove that to be true, right? And the evidence comes after the investigation. There is no actual hard evidence that will tell you anything unless you really question it, right? And so people will come out and say that, but they will believe bullshit from authority figures and media.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
We talk more about authority figures and all that as we transition into this next phase of our podcast, which is about
This is the dance mix version.
which is about sadism, not Satanism,
not Satanism.
sadism. But before we start talking about sadism and sadistic behavior, I just want to reiterate to you once again that, like I said, back about a week after the national emergency was declared, when JP and I sat in a lovely, peaceful, calm park in front of a waterfall, and we said, your life is going to be a series of 9/11s. One disaster and one trauma-based mind control, anxiety-riddled panic, like Elaine said, after another. And hasn't it been since the national emergency was declared on March 13th of 2020? Hasn't it been just one 9/11 after another? Right? And you're just like, hair on fire for everything.
Hey, remember the
calm down
trucks crashing into buildings?
Yeah, trucks were crashing into buildings.
We had 2 of them here in the Keys Rocks.
Grain plants apparently full of grain that we need to make bread were catching fire. Oh my God. The egg problem. Remember the egg issue? Remember the toilet paper caper? Remember that? That took place prior to the COVID.
That was the result. That was during the COVID thing, right? The first few months of it.
Before lockdown.
Oh, right before lockdown. All of a sudden.
Because we were in Target.
Yeah, we were in a Target, and we're like, God, where's all the toilet paper?
Yeah, it was weird. It was before the national emergency was declared.
And then they started blaming people on hoarding. And it was like, no.
People aren't hoarding. People didn't hoard it. Stop blaming people.
Right.
It's the government. It's the corporations. It's the public-private partnerships. It's the people who control the supply chain. Those are the people to blame. Don't blame people, because everybody, who's in charge of the media and in charge of the propaganda want you to blame your equal and you need to punch up. Always punch up. Always blame the rich guys because they're the ones that are causing all this.
And the state.
And the state.
Fuck the state.
Yeah. Yeah, not a fan of the state.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's go back to 2020 when
Can we go?
yeah, let's do our little wave
Okay.
time machine wave effect and go back to 2020 when we knew, all of us knew, that the elderly were being held captive against their will. Their families were being kept from them. Most of them were starved and beaten and died as a result of either neglect or just, whatever. They didn't die of COVID, right? And I would argue that, people in care homes have been treated deplorably for years and years and years. And the only, the kind of the good thing that came out of the whole COVID experience is that it brought the normalization of abuse towards the elderly in the care homes,
right?
or in the nursing homes.
Mhm.
It brought it up to the spotlight. Like, there's people around here that work at nursing homes, and I'm just like, oh my God, I hope I never ever have to go to a nursing home. I watched my own grandmother right before she died. She was covered in bruises, so I don't trust those nursing home facilities. I think they are horrible, awful places. They always have been. And one thing that the COVID experience showed us is it brought all of that to light and became more transparent. And so now I feel that people are less inclined to put their elderly in those care homes or in those nursing home facilities. So that's a good thing. But we also heard story after story. And this is all anecdotal stuff that I read on Twitter over the last few years. This is people that I've even talked to personally in my little neighborhood of poverty here, where individuals who were brought in for COVID, or individuals who were brought in for like a slight cough or an itchy toe or a headache, were suddenly told that they had COVID, and they were bound to their hospital beds. They were either zip tied to their hospital beds or they were bound. Immediate oxygen was immediately placed over their face, and they were treated pretty badly, and some of them died that way. And that people were saying that it just had this weird, like, it started to feel more like a concentration camp type of feel to it rather than a hospital. There's a lady that lives practically across the street from us
Mhm.
who watched her own daughter, who's about my age, die that way.
She's about a block away from us.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we ran into this woman at the local grocery store a few months ago, and she was talking to us, and all of a sudden she started to tear up, and we're like, oh no, is everything okay? What happened? And she said that her daughter died of COVID. And we said, oh, that's terrible. Like, what
Tell us
happened?
more. Yeah, what happened?
What
Yeah.
happened? And what she described, without even realizing what she was describing, what she described was murder.
Mhm.
Out and out murder. Her daughter went in for something very simple and was tortured, given all sorts of toxins, and is now dead. So that's the level of of sadism. So sadism was normalized in during the COVID operation, and so we can see it sort of seeping into our culture now in other ways. I don't want to go into some language because I have friends who would identify as certain ways. And so I'm not going to go there, but I am going to say that we're seeing sadistic behavior kind of seep into culture
Mhm.
and especially affect the children.
Well, I think this started happening. Can I
Mhm.
interject?
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause I think this
Yeah, it's hard to
started-
talk about.
Yeah.
And here I am, getting ready to, I'm writing a video essay about this. I'm writing the script for it. And I'm
Mhm.
just like, oh,
So-
this is hard.
This has been seeping into the culture, and a lot of people have been talking about, woke culture and all that, and the negativity that's brought into the general culture, general population. And I just read an email from our friend Crow from Nevermore Media, and it was he was talking about a friend of his who died like right after the whole COVID thing, but he didn't got caught up in that. He was homeless at that point, living in a tent near a river, and our friend Crow feels that his comrade was killed, and the police made up some story about him falling out of a tree. But what his point of this article was, or this piece in the email, this email newsletter, was that this was that the woke culture is affecting not just normal people that had no idea it was where it was coming from, but also people who were activists, especially in the anarchist communities. That the woke culture kind of overtook the anarchist communities, especially people who were activists and especially people who cared. And these people were then demonized and shunned, thrown out and kept away from their communities because this sort of woke ideology came into favor and took the place of actually being a human, right? Where it was more important about people's feelings and people's reaction to something somebody said than actually a real something that was actually a real offense, right?
Yeah.
And especially in a radical political context where people are going to say things that are not going to be standard issue things, because they're coming from a place of radical thought and thinking around how people would normally be. And in this case, this individual had some isolation from his family. He had some mental issues. I'm not sure what his upbringing was, but nobody took that into consideration. And he had been isolated from his community and his friends. And our friend Crow thinks that had a lot to do with his death.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw all that happen in COVID, and we keep seeing it happen, like reinventing itself.
So
we have another friend whose sister was abused by her husband, and our friend thinks that her sister was murdered by her husband. And when she went to the police to try to open up an investigation, they were like, no, it was suicide. Move on, move along.
So I feel like this woke thing, the woke culture, was sort of a precursor to what we're seeing now in this sort of sadistic behavior.
So those of us who've been autonomous all along and have seen sort of liberal ideology, or what's now called woke culture, seep into our philosophy, we're this is not anything new to us. A lot of people are screaming hair on fire about it now, especially the conservatives. It's like, dude, well, we've been dealing with this for a long time. Like, we've been watching our sort of revulsion towards the government, which is considered anarchism. We've watched that just become completely co-opted by liberal language,
right? And we started seeing it in the anarchist circles on like Facebook and stuff, and it was like
on social media,
so it was full of operatives and spooks and operatives, right?
Totally, like Facebook is nothing but spooks, right. Except for you guys. Right. You guys are great. Those of you who are watching on Facebook, we're on quite a few different platforms now.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is talk about the normalization of sadism and all those things that I mentioned about how the elderly were abused and people were basically, practically hogtied and all this, had all sorts of toxic poisons, injected in them against their will. Their family was kept away from them. I want to bring in the two doctors.
Oh, you want to?
And I want to play.
They're lawyers.
I'm sorry, the two lawyers.
Yeah.
They're actually lawyers. So we'll play it. But before we play it, let me set it up. So if you can bring it in while I talk, right? Or,
it'll start playing.
It'll start playing. So. Okay. So the one that's talking is you'll hear him. But prior to that, the guy sitting next to him is another another lawyer. And so here's what happened. He lives in Fresno.
Fresno,
He
California.
lives in Fresno, California. And he said, some people came up to him and said, hey, look at my family members' arms. They're like bruised from being zip tied to their beds when they were told that they had COVID. I think that there's something really weird going on in the hospitals. And the lawyer said, yeah, I don't know. But then he said every single person he talked to corroborated this story. And so many people came to him.
He started getting letters and emails.
Letters and emails coming in day after day. Like he just couldn't, like he was like, okay, there's definitely something to this. Like people are being murdered by the state. They're being murdered by these hospitals. They're being tortured. It's sadistic. So I want you to listen to what this other lawyer has to say, but I wanted to set it up for you. And of course, it's a Del Bigtree interview, so you guys may have already seen it. I know there's a lot of Del Bigtree fans out there. We're not really Del Bigtree fans, but we do appreciate what these two lawyers have to say. Okay.
All right. Cool. Let me start playing it. I hope it's on the spot that we wanted it to play.
If it's not, we'll just fast forward it. It's not, so we got to fast forward it.
Okay, and it was what?
Try 2236, I believe it was. Okay, just start playing.
You look at sometimes the button for calling for a nurse is removed. They're in this room. They're isolated from their family. They're zip tied down. The oxygen is being shoved into them. And then sometimes a psychiatrist will come in and say, well, you look agitated. Let's get you on a morphine drip. And then they can't fight the effects of the remdesivir, which is doing something to their kidneys. Their lungs are filling up with fluid. They're not given food or water of any kind, not through an IV, of no kind. Average time to death is about 9 days. And they are, and the doctors are giving word tracks to the families. They're saying, you don't have medical training.
Okay.
Right. You know.
Right.
And they're bullying them, and they're saying, look, if you don't.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Hide on stream. Okay. Okay. There we
so, we're going to include, it's a 3-hour interview. I mean, there's different sections to it.
No words. Oh, they didn't hear the audio.
Oh, wait, no. She heard it. What she's meaning, what she's saying is that she has no words to respond to the horrors of what this guy was saying. So there's much more that is said, but in the interest of time, because we've been going at this we're
coming up on an hour and a half.
Yeah. So we've been going at this for a while. So we wanted to say that a lot of you had been, basically talking about this for 3 years, and it feels like you probably feel like you've been talking to brick walls, but what I want to do is I want you to really, because I'm working on this video about sadism, okay? And the video is going to be called It's Not Satanism, It's Sadism, okay? What I want you to do is I want you to picture what that attorney was just saying and what the attorney who's sitting next to him had said before he started talking, which was, you get an individual that goes in with a headache, and you get a whole crew of doctors and nurses, or especially nurses, that are at the ready, and they're like, oh, and they give you a test. Exactly, Brooke. Exactly. It's routinely done to those put in hospice. I know somebody very personal to me who was in hospice, who I believe was murdered. So we'll just leave it at that. So what happens is these people go in with a headache. They're told that they have COVID. They're given some bullshit test that comes up positive for COVID. Then they are whisked away. They're thrown into a wheelchair, and oh my God, you have COVID. They're whisked away. They get their cell phone taken from them, so they can't call their families. They're thrown into a bed. They're
zip tied to their bed.
Zip tied to their bed like this. Then immediately, so this is the position that they're in, guys. This is the position. Now, JP, tell me if after 4 hours, what happens to your lungs when you're in this position? Does anybody? No. We're not going to go there yet. Yeah. So what happens? Does anybody remember their biology 101 class?
This makes it hard to breathe.
Exactly. It makes it really hard to breathe. I'm having trouble breathing right now. Okay. Oh no, you're having trouble breathing. That's the COVID. That's the COVID. After they've been zip tied like this for an hour, not able to call the nurse, not able to pick up their goddamn cell phone and tell their family that they're being held captive because under the National Defense Authorization Act, Obama passed a law that said you can target and disappear and even assassinate American citizens without due process. This was a military exercise. What you're witnessing right here is a military exercise. These people were walking in to the emergency rooms with headaches. They were being told by the media that they may have COVID and to immediately go to the emergency room and get yourself checked out. Make sure. This is how they were for hours and hours. So then you get a nurse that comes over and says, "Oh, we better put some oxygen in you." So you're like this, and you've got oxygen over your face for another hour. And what happens when you're overloaded with oxygen? You get a little woozy. You're just like, okay, I don't know what's going on, and your head starts to slump, and your head starts to go down. What does this look like? What does this look like, you guys? What does this look like? JP, you can show the picture now.
Okay.
What does this look
Somebody
like?
said it looked like surrender, but we would say that it looks more like
Exactly.
a crucifixion.
Exactly. So this is what people experienced in 2020 and probably on into 2021. They were the sacrificial lambs, and it was torture. They were the sacrificial lambs that had to be sacrificed on the COVID cross in order to promote this idea that we needed a militarized deployment of countermeasures that the HHS would get out in front and pander for. Exactly,
Right.
Elaine.
So-
oh my God, right?
And and crucifixion was a torture. It wasn't just to kill people. It was the Romans were definitely, and Abu Ghraib, right?
Exactly.
That's
That's where I first went, Kate,
Mhm.
was the Abu Ghraib. So you can't ever forget. And I feel like this explosions and supply chain issues and chickens not laying eggs and all this other stuff happening with, story hour at your local library and the poor children and all of that is getting in the way of the fact that people were targeted under a military operation, held against their will outside of due process, and then exterminated, all for a profit, all so that the tech sector could make money, also that venture capitalists could make money, also that the
Health industrial
health
complex.
industrial complex could become the new constitution, and you all know about the World Health Organization's constitution and the international health regulations that are being reframed. You can follow James Roguski about that. I've talked about him before. He's really good at that. But what I want to talk about, what I want to focus on, is the normalization of this sadistic operation. Okay, and how it ties into, as I was listening to those two lawyers talk on Del Bigtree, and as they were describing the bruising on the arms from the zip ties being held against their will, I was like, wait a minute, that's like a crucifixion. It made me think that there was this weird sadistic attachment to a religious crucifixion, and I wanted to just kind of like open that up because I'm probably going to end up going there in the video essay, but I just need I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah. By the way, we forgot to put the link to that episode on in our show notes. We'll do that after the fact.
We'll give you the
But
link.
just to tell you,
It's
that
3
was,
hours.
It's
so-
3 hours. That was episode 286 called Septic Science for Del Bigtree.
Right, you can
So,
put it in the chat if you want it right now.
Well, I don't have the link. I mean, I guess I could take the link. Yeah, sure.
just-
I could put
if
it in
you
the
just-
chat, but I will put it in our show notes. But
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes as well.
So yeah, all right. I'll put it in the chat.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. Oh, just hit.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. It's sadism, right? Can we all agree that that was a sadistic military operation and that could very well still be going on. We haven't heard as many stories about it. But again, these attorneys were just on Del Bigtree's show in September.
Was it September?
I believe it was September of 2022.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
September
High Wire
2022.
with Del Bigtree,
Yeah.
September 2022.
Yeah.
So that's just a few months ago. So is this still happening? Maybe. Have lawsuits started to come out? Maybe. Let's hope so. What do you think about let's talk about how it's, as you are learning more about the COVID operation and you're learning more that it's a military exercise, your moral conscience and your understanding of ethics and your understanding of morality
Well, I would
is
say
bubbling up into the surface.
I'd say your human sense, your sense of human not the ethics and morality that have been imposed on us from the state
but
or the church or
innate,
or corporations, right? Your
Mhm.
own innate human connection to other people, right? People, we are a social species, right? And so, yeah. So we're what we're trying to say is that this is about, your, like a human response to what's going on out there, not, well, go on with what you were going to say.
Humans are inherently good.
Right.
Humans are good. Human beings are inherently good.
But we keep getting told that we're not, right?
But we keep getting told we're not, but we are inherently good. And so because you are inherently good, because it's within your divine nature to feel compassion and feel moral and feel outraged when you see a deployment of a murder operation right in front of your eyes, your sense of righteousness bubbles up. It comes out and it's very strong in you. I don't believe that thing that's bubbling up in you is God. I believe it's you. I believe that you have that innate sense of understanding
Mhm.
about what's right and what's wrong. You know the difference between right and wrong, and I believe that it's being miscategorized with those people who have, sort of taken control of the COVID narrative. It's being miscategorized,
At least the alternative COVID narrative, right?
or the alternative of the COVID narrative,
Yeah.
because it's being miscategorized as God. And so once again, you're handing yourself over to an authority figure instead of acknowledging what's inherently in you. It's and I know there's a lot of religious people that follow us, and I know there's a lot of Christians that follow us and all this, and I have a lot of respect for you. You've done a lot of good work. But I'm possibly talking to those people who don't operate in that religious place, who are also against what we just witnessed, this torture and murder based on a military exercise. Okay. Talking to those people who aren't necessarily religious,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
I think that and you talked about this before, about the demonization of the light bringers. If you want to talk about Prometheus, or no, you
well,
don't
I
want
don't really
to?
want to get into that because I don't have it fully formulated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
But I mean, I think that there's been a demonization of people throughout human history. And I don't want to get too far into this other than just to kind of touch on that, we're seeing it more and more through scapegoating individuals, through cancel culture, and things of that nature. So the people who have been oppressed in the past are now being lifted up, but it's an insincere lifting up. So anytime somebody says anything negative about, say, Israel, they're suddenly anti-Semitic, right? Or if they say, like Scott Adams said, like, I don't want to live in the hood or whatever, and he's suddenly racist, right? So, these inauthentic attacks, or these inauthentic support for oppressed or marginalized people who literally who were and have been and are being oppressed and marginalized, but not helped, are being lifted up as an example of somebody that we should like, pay attention to. So we get these like weird things that are going on out there where people are being attacked for saying what they're for things they say or, allegedly say, because it's never, anything like that. But this has gone out throughout history, and it's been, pushed onto people like the Jews or, the Native Americans or people of African descent, the African diaspora, right? And they've been, marginalized and stories have been said about them, to make them sound, to basically dehumanize people. And I think that this has been going on throughout the world, and throughout human history. However, it has hit an all-time high to where it's like it used to be groups of people that stories were told about, to now it's individuals. And I think that the scapegoating follows that path of, like you said, the light bringers, right? So like the Prometheuses, people or archetypes in stories that were there to do the right thing for humanity were targeted. Jesus Christ, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that these,
targeted.
And I think that these things are now becoming more and more prominent and over time. And I think that it has to do with the fact that media has such a larger reach. I guess this is sort of the media episode, right? Media allows for dogpiling, social media especially. It allows for cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
It allows for
it promotes it.
It promotes it, right?
I mean,
it does promote it, right? But it also allows for like doxing,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So all these things come about as a result of this mass dogpiling, as it were, right?
I think it's really interesting that, and I've said this before a lot over the last 3 years, that the dominating group of people, the people that have dominated hey, I'm going to question the COVID narrative, and I don't think that what's happening is good, and I don't really believe that it's a health scare, and I'm unpacking this and researching it. The demographic or the group of the people that have dominated that language are the religious right. So much so that even, self-actualized liberals who could easily stand on their own, or self-actualized individuals who weren't religious and maybe were a little liberal to begin with, they didn't need to move into the religious right paradigm, but they did anyway, because it's so dominating. Like, you can't listen to a podcast anywhere without it being like Jesus this or God that, or it's a spiritual war this or a spiritual war that. And I'm just like, what about those of us who,
our spirituality rests in other areas?
Our spirituality is different.
I've railed about this before. I've been vocal about this in the past. It's like, I get angry with the Christian narrative, or the Christians that only want to put these things into the context of Christianity versus something else, as opposed to
versus like a military exercise,
right? And it's like, they will go out and start blaming pagans, for instance, and it's like, well, I kind of identify in that realm of the world, so don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Right. And so this idea that, the 5 docs the other day were like, repent for taking the vax. It's like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, yeah, that's so I'm concerned, and it's a concern that I had from the very beginning, that as the COVID operation morphs into something different, that what we're going to get is a very subtle introduction into something like The Handmaid's Tale, and
using that counter narrative and the people who support it to push us into that, because we're all being manipulated, and easily so.
Right.
So I have a feeling that that's a good possibility. That's something that we're speculating.
It feels like it's really headed there. And
Mhm.
that scares me more than the COVID operation. I feel like I can handle the military, because the military is just like, we're not going to force you to take this countermeasure, and we're not going to force you into a bed and zip tie you to the thing and crucify you and all that.
We'll seduce you into that.
We'll
but-
seduce you into it,
or coerce you,
we'll
or whatever.
We'll try to convince you through the
But
media.
but it won't be at gunpoint.
Yeah, we're not going to come to your door and break down your door and do it. So I feel like I can, because of who I am, I can just be like, well, I'm just not going to operate within the world of fascism. I'm just not going to do it. Or Nazism. I'm just not going to do it. And that's easy. But what's harder to do, in my opinion, is a Handmaid's Tale type of situation where it's like, repent. It's like, whoa, no, I'm not going to, and that's scarier to me. That's actually a lot scarier to me than the COVID operation. And I'll tell you why. Because it's the Christian right that tell children to go get their own form of punishment. You've never met a more sadistic group of people than these people. They are so sadistic. They talk about how, we got to protect the children from the trans community or whatever. Excuse me, I have trans friends who are just as appalled with what they're seeing on social media as you are. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's even really happening. Remember, social media is a construct. What's happening in the real world is totally different. So I would say that the religious right have a deep-seated hatred of children, especially when they tell their own children to go get their form of punishment. Children just doing their thing, just being children, making mistakes, getting dirty, talking back, learning language, learning how to stand up for themselves. Next thing you know, their religious right parents feel threatened by that somehow and say, that was a bad thing that you did, so I'm going to need you to go back into the shed and get the belt. Get which belt you want me to whip you with, or which, utensil out of the kitchen you want me to hit you with. That is so sadistic. And that's the religious right. And that's where we're headed. That's why I'm like, the idea that the religious right has taken over the narrative of, what's happening in the COVID operation is scarier to me than the COVID operation itself.
Yeah. So.
Because I was able to circumvent and avoid the COVID operation by simply no longer going to, see a doctor or just say, no, thanks. We had to live in poverty for a long time because we circumvented various operations, because we had our morals that we, and we had no choice. Okay. So to me, this is very, very concerning, especially when you've got very influential people saying things like repent. And I'm just like, why are we using that language?
Yeah, why are we using that language?
Maybe start picking up, The Handmaid's Tale and read through it again and remind yourself that we don't want to go there.
Well, okay, so this is where I differ with, especially with that whole discussion around repentance. These people were coerced. I don't like them. I don't like what they said about us. I don't like what they did. I hate the fact that they just gave in and went along with the whole narrative. I was just complaining about somebody that I worked with. They're stupid.
They drag us down like the crabs in the bucket.
Right.
I get it.
But I don't think that was an act of cowardice. I think that was an act of stupidity, or an act of blindly going along and listening to authority. And that's the thing that I think we're railing against the most right now is this idea of authority,
right?
And somebody telling you what to do,
whether it's God or your local representative,
right,
or your teacher or your grandma,
right?
Don't fucking tell me what to do. Ever. I'm not going to go get my own form of punishment.
So we're exactly. So what we're telling you is to think for yourself and be,
We're not telling people anything.
Well, we're
saying what we do.
Right. Well, I guess what we're saying is follow your own inner feeling, right?
Mhm.
If you are a spiritual person, I don't care how that comes out, whether it's through Christianity, Taoism, Hinduism, Baha'i, whatever it is that you follow, right? That's you.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Okay. But
Yeah, we're fine with.
but when we're talking about this and this idea of like demonizing people, that's when it's becoming a problem. I think that we're all being separated. We're all being pushed apart and separated and made weak by whoever, whatever organization, whatever people, the global elite, whatever you want to call them, are doing to us as a society.
Yeah, and and so what you're Natasha, what you're talking about is corporal punishment, and so am I. With the whole getting your own form of punishment,
Mhm.
I would say that you're growing up Catholic and you got spanked and sent to your room. That's corporal punishment, and I'm against it. I would never, if I had children, I would never spank them. Sorry, it's just it's a known fact that children who were hit by their parents grow up with problems, and if they're aware of it and acknowledge those emotional problems or those psychological problems through counseling or through understanding what it means to be a scapegoat, and the whole triad and all that stuff, then they can be self-actualized healthy adults like we are, because we both were the victims of corporal punishment, like most Americans are. It's appalling because there's a lot of Europeans that I've met that are like, wow, that's what's wrong with America. That's what's wrong with the United States.
I think that there was,
you give in to authority too much.
Well, I think, okay, so they did give into fear, but I think other people are acting, on the right side of history, acting out of fear now from other narratives that are coming across.
Right.
The whole idea that food is going away, I feel is a narrative that's being put out there to make people afraid, right? And there's a lot of people that made their decision out of very practical reasons. I really don't want to lose my job. My ex-wife was she's coming up on the time where she can probably retire from her government job. This took place probably 5 years out from her retirement. Does she really want to give that up? She probably got vaccinated. I don't know. I don't talk to her, so I have no idea.
Probably not.
She doesn't talk to me. Maybe that's the better way of putting it. So what I'm trying to say is that the fear comes in different formats. And the fear is being pushed on all of us, because I can tell you, I will hear something on social media and I'll have to go, wait a minute. Is that really happening?
Right.
Is that really happening? Don't get afraid. And there's a lot of people now out there that are saying this. Okay.
Fear
they're like, don't give in to that fear. And I appreciate that the pundits out there that are now saying that. I think that's a very important message to put out to all of us.
Oh, sure. And as long as you understand that the military and, any kind of industrial complex that carries, large amounts of weapons, whether it's the police or the military, they're basically trained from day one to use fear. And as long as you're aware of that, it's just part of their training. That's what they use. They use fear. They use fear narratives to get people to, submit, right? It's a military exercise. Like it's not some, mass formation psychosis and everybody's, under a spell and everybody's, magically going into fear. No, it's a military exercise. That's what the military does. They use fear. Just like they use a gun, just like they use a bomb, they use fear. They use fear as a weapon. They weaponize fear. They weaponize weather. They weaponize religion. They weaponize everything. This is a military exercise. Do we want to talk about the venture capitalists who have agreed with me? Changing gears a little bit.
These people we were bitching about not 2 weeks ago, but yeah, well, we don't like the venture capitalists too much, but we listen to them. We listen to them for their opinions because they are knowledgeable in their particular field. So sure, why not? We're coming up on the 2-hour mark, and I think we have about 10 minutes, so we can kind of cover that.
And I want to acknowledge what Natasha said, that that this is what's key. You would have appreciated guidance and an
Mhm.
explanation over
Yeah.
spanking and
I
isolation.
agree. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I grew up Catholic too. I
Yeah,
would have
his-
appreciated that as well.
Right. And it's like every once in a while, that Catholic upbringing comes out, and I'm just like, wow.
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, parents are not great. Parents are awful. Glad I never had to be one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel bad for people who have them. Because we all have parents. So I feel bad for everyone.
Everybody, let's all hug each other right now.
It feels so, so weird to say, but
I know. Well,
but-
we wouldn't be around if there weren't parents.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
like they say in the 12-step communities, your buttons, your parents know how to push your buttons because they installed them.
Mhm.
I'm not part of the
Mhm.
12-step community, but I've lived with people who are. So anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on.
So the this will have to do with central bank digital currency. And before I move on, I do want to read Kate's message because she did say the word anarchist and libertarian. So what I've seen is that people made fearful seek for authority to protect and guide them. So church people, political people, liberal people, and even anarchists are libertarians.
Sure. Yeah. The dogma can get away in the way of everybody. Right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why we just decided that we're not going to be afraid of authority. Like why it just really turns us off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. So venture capitalists in Silicon Valley have said that every single person must be on board and supportive of central bank digital currency for it to start rolling out. And right now, there is no unanimous support in the financial sector.
So this is what was said. Was this a quote or is this?
It's not a quote per se, but it's because you know how they take forever to say.
Sure. Can you want to reiterate that? Can you say it again?
Okay. So in order for central bank digital currency to really roll out, there has to be unanimous support, and there just isn't any in the financial sector.
And what do you need to make CBDCs?
Blockchain.
Right. And what is there not unanimous support for?
CBDCs.
And blockchain.
And blockchain.
Okay, yes.
So I had said this before they made their little profound statement, and these guys are millionaires and billionaires, and I'm just not.
We just we live.
I just speculate because I'm intuitive, and I said, and I talked about the 4 pillars that need to crumble in order to make CBDC a thing, and that's central bank digital currency. So you need a social pillar, a social
I don't think
barrier. Pillar isn't the right word.
Pillar is not the right
the
word.
Pillars
And
need
when
to
you
fall.
When you did that, when I listened to what you were saying, and I was like, pillars isn't quite the right word.
So
barrier is a better word.
Barrier is a better word.
Yeah.
And I'll just tell you really briefly why I chose the words pillar. Because I often think of the United States, especially as Rome. And whenever I think of Rome and the Roman Empire, I think of pillars.
Right.
And so I think of these different things that need to fall in order for Rome to fall.
Right, sure.
Right. So,
but in this case, you were reading from the Harvard Review. Yeah, and they use the word barrier.
Right. They use barriers.
These barriers have to get out of the way in order for CBDC and blockchain specifically is what that article is about to come through.
Oh, well, Evangel 17, I just said that, in my experience, the Christian right, I'm talking about like the Christian right. Like I don't like the evangelicals.
Like what
maybe?
You grew up in.
Yeah. That in my experience, there's a lot of corporal punishment, hardcore corporal punishment. And I mean, everywhere I went to a private Christian academy. Everybody got beat by their parents. Like it happens in my experience. So, and I've been in many different situations and have had hundreds of conversations with people in the Christian right that can corroborate this. So,
sources,
but yes,
sources
say.
Anyway, back to blockchain and CBDC.
So The 4 barriers need to go away: the social barrier, the technological barrier, the financial barrier, and the organizational barrier. So the social barrier is that an individualistic society must be unified. So this is where, right now we are in a republic, and this country allegedly was based on individual freedoms and individual rights. So that premise that's baked into the Constitution and is baked into our human sovereignty needs to go away.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why we're seeing the vilification of, like you see, before COVID was happening, you'd see this like vilification of the individual, right? What was it called? Not toxic masculinity, but something about
rugged individualism,
right, was being, demonized and,
Mhm.
and yeah, but and yet it's part of, our culture. And, but it was overemphasized at the beginning of the 20th century to the point to where it was like, it was a way of splitting up communities. Now what they're trying to do is take that away, and even though they're breaking us up as true communities, they're also trying to push us together to make us like accept things like,
central bank,
central
digital
bank.
currency.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right. So the one of the barriers is that the social barrier needs to be destroyed, which means that an individualistic society needs to become unified.
Right.
Like we're all equal. Right.
Well, that's the equity talk.
And so they're really trying to make that happen by making us all poor, equally poor.
Right.
Because I don't believe in race and race issues and all that stuff.
It's all about class issues.
I believe only in class issues. The other barrier,
next one is technology.
the other barrier that needs to go away is a technological barrier. So all other tech that exists outside of blockchain needs to go away. It needs to just poof, go away. Like any money that goes into, any other kind of tech all that money needs to be rehomed into blockchain. And good luck with that.
Mhm.
That's just not,
especially with the rise of AI, which is equally disturbing, but
right.
Is where the money is going right now.
Right.
Yeah.
All the money is going into the tech that we're on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Financial. So that's another barrier that needs to crumble and go away in order to make CBDCs a thing and make them really relevant. The financial barrier. That means that all banks need to wholly fail. And they're trying to do that. They are, as we've witnessed with SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, and Signature Bank, and First Republic,
Swiss.
and Suisse and Credit Suisse, and all that. Like all of this needs to fail. So whether it truly is failing, I don't know, but they're certainly giving us the illusion of failure, because they know that that's the one point that can really get to people and really make people afraid. So, oh my God, the banks are failing. We're going to go to CBDC. We're going to go to central bank digital currency. Oh my God, so they know that you'll go there. So, so these
Again,
manufactured crises like this bank failure will. So I would say, as far as the banks wholly failing, good luck with that. I don't know if the big four are going to want to fail in order to usher in digital currency,
and
even though they threaten to.
Which comes to the next point, organizational.
Mm-hmm. Organizational.
And
right. That's the next barrier that needs to go
And
away.
I have to say, like banks as corporations, the big four especially, they do not have it within them to be 100% on board with anything. There's so much churn. There's so much siloing within these organizations that nothing, it's, as they say, it's like like steering an oil tanker, right? You can't turn on a dime. You have to turn on a mile, right? It takes a long time for these types of organizations to get somewhere. And even if the CEOs came out, well, Bank of America said that they were going to be, rolling out blockchain in a matter of, I don't know how long that was, but we're still waiting.
But they never gave any specifics how.
Right.
And so the how is really important.
Right. Yeah.
You need the engineers, you need the talent for blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the talent, JP?
They all took the shot, and they're part of the statistics that Edward Dowd has been talking about, right?
Right.
They're
so,
not in. They're the Great Resignation,
right.
right? So your talent isn't there.
So the talent, though, that doesn't mean that the talent won't come in the future. And I believe that
It may come around eventually,
right. So I believe that
but
kids,
it's not around the corner.
Right. So I believe that kids who put together these, and we talked about this in Globotics, where they put together these little toys called Blockly, and they use blockchain technology in order to make their toys. So these children are like,
It's not blockchain technology. It's just programming.
It's just programming.
Yeah,
but they use Blockly.
Blockly is not, and it doesn't have anything to do
but
with blockchain.
I think what it does is it helps them think about systems
absolutely.
that would help them, so that when it comes time to learn blockchain, they've already got that kind of thinking
mentality
and programming
Sure.
in their brain.
The reason they call it Blockly is because it's lines of code that have been organized into these visual blocks, and they put them together.
It's like Legos, right?
It is like
it's
Legos.
more like Legos,
right? But it is along the lines of thinking systematically, and
that's what I was trying to get. Not that it itself was blockchain, but that it would help them go to the next level to get to blockchain.
Yeah, right.
And so when you talk about central bank digital currencies, which can't go unless it's blockchain. I mean, it is blockchain.
Right.
Then you need the talent. And right now we don't have the talent.
So right now we just don't have it. And let me just kind of give you a frame of reference. Again, context, right? For the last 25 years, I've been hearing about the Internet of Things. Where's the Internet of Things? Well, it does exist in small places, in your Nest, dial for your, for controlling your home, or, these smart homes that exist. People have these systems in place. That is part of your Internet of Things. You have Sidewalk from Amazon, which is kind of also the Internet of Things in its own way, because it uses a different system. Okay, so the Internet of Things has found its way into our lives in very small and very specific ways, but it's not as ubiquitous as they claimed it was going to be. We have a water heater downstairs that can be hooked up to our Wi-Fi, but I never did that. Why? Because I don't want it to be. But I would have to find a way to get that water heater hooked up to our Wi-Fi, and I don't even know how to do that. Which brings me to my next point about blockchain. And that is we have cryptocurrency, which does use blockchain. Okay. So like the Internet of Things, we do have, things that are blockchain oriented in our life, in our world, but not everybody can do it. I just saw an article about, I am a user experience designer, UX. There is no UX in blockchain. There is no UX in crypto. People who don't know how to do it can't do it. We have a hard time doing. We got paid in some crypto, and
we're like, oh,
what do we do with this shit?
How do we
turn this into money?
Into fiat currency? Because we really don't know how.
We don't know how.
How? Honestly, we don't.
And so if we can't do it, there's going to be a lot of people out there, your mom, your grandma, your, whatever, right? Your relatives. People are not going to be able to do it. If there is no easy way to do this, to make this work for individuals. Just like I can't hook up my water heater to my Wi-Fi.
Right.
I'm not participating in the Internet of Things.
Right.
And I'm not choosing to participate in a Nest or a Sidewalk or a Ring.
Amazon Ring.
Or any of this stuff.
Whatever. Yeah.
So
Sorry, CIA.
Sorry, CIA. That's why it was CIA Amazon, right? So if there's going to be CBDC, it's going to be a ways out, and it's going to take a lot of effort to get there. 4 barriers.
The 4 barriers.
The 4 barriers.
Social, technological, financial, and organizational. Basically, what you have to do is you have to bomb everything into oblivion in order to make it happen.
And if that happens, we're going to self-organize and make our own currencies and our own ways of trading.
And they
our
know
own,
that. So
yeah,
it's like
it's, yeah.
they're going to keep the fiat thing going for as long as they can until they can't anymore. And so I think teaching the kids now how to think in these kinds of system ways is sort of like a backup plan. I think that, it's more like a backup plan rather than an inevitability.
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So I don't think that any of this is inevitable. Even AI is proving to be difficult. It's being used in very small ways. Bing now has, Chat GPT or whatever it's called, right? So, these technologies that are adopting it in small ways. If you chat with a bot on, some, e-commerce site or your bank or whatever, it's very limited, right? It's very limited.
Yeah.
And so, it's going to get better. And, the robotics thing too. I mean, they keep promoting these things and they keep showing you how. In fact, I wanted to show something, but I forgot to bring it up. But because I wanted to get into this idea of AI and robotics and stuff. It's still very primitive. I saw a video. It was a presentation by Disney at South by Southwest. Oh, excuse me, South by, and and it was this little robot that was very cute. And the whole point of the presentation was designing robots to meet human emotion, right? To get people to adopt to the idea of having a robotic companion in the future. Okay. Maybe we'll do an essay on this one. And it was this very cute little robot. And it was, oh, wow, we're over the 2-hour mark. I'll speed this up. It was a very cute little robot. I mean, even I thought it was cute, right? And it had roller skates and a little helmet and a tail. So it looked like a little rabbit, I think is what it was. And it was a little girl rabbit on skates and a helmet. But it was very cute, right? But here's the thing. It was a program.
Right.
It did what they said it was going to do. They had the whole routine down. This is not a machine that just interacts just spontaneously. This is a performance.
Peeping.
And so
yeah, they need closed caption. Okay,
sorry about that.
That's okay.
I apologize. Yeah, okay. So we'll continue to try to keep that on. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is just like AI, just like CBDC, just like blockchain, and robotics and AI, all these technologies, yes, they will eventually come, but they are not around the corner like they keep saying they are.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to make a comment and then we're going to go.
Okay.
So what I'm going to say is I need the mouse.
Okay.
What I'm going to say is to peeping here because we want to make sure we address that. We are finished with our broadcast, but the closed captioning will be on for the replay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And send. Did that send?
Yeah.
Okay, there it is.
All right. Cool.
All right.
Okay.
Oh my God.
I know.
It's been quite an afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think we learned a lot.
We've learned a lot together today.
We've learned a lot together.
Yeah.
Yep.
So make sure that you get out into your neighborhood.
And we just really want to thank you guys for joining, and we love your comments. Thank you for the engagement.
Yeah.
We learn a lot from you. And I know that there are some things that we say that are maybe contradictory to your belief system and what you maybe in your echo chamber, but I think that different voices help this thing along, right? We're all individuals, and so
yes, we are all individuals.
Oh, thank you, Sam. That's really sweet.
Yeah, that's very nice.
That's
Thank
really
you.
nice to hear. Thank you so much for saying that. And again, we want to thank the patrons and the supporters and the donors, and the people who send us letters and emails and even phone calls
And even checks.
and even checks in the mail. Thank you for that.
Thank you, B.
Every little bit helps here and there. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
Next thing that I have is a video essay. It's called "It's Sadism, Not Satanism," and it's all about how we've really normalized sadistic behavior. Some of it you may not agree with. Some of it you may have never even considered before. I think I blew some minds today when I showed the picture of Christ on the cross and
talked about the
Re-
hospitals and the
relay-
Abu Ghraib.
right, and
So
Abu
all
Ghraib.
those things, yeah. So-
and relay that to the people in the hospitals in 2020 when they were zip tied to their beds. Just always remember, this is a military operation using fear as a weapon. And don't get distracted with all this other stuff, because I guarantee you walk outside your front door and your neighbors are doing fine, So just keep that in mind. Like, just go out, have a beer at the bar, have a good time like we've been doing this week.
Yeah,
It's been really great hanging out with friends.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's the important thing.
Yeah.
All right.
So thank you for that. And we
Yeah.
will see you in a month.
Yeah. All right. See you next month. Bye.
Bye.
Bookmark is made possible by our patrons and supporters. You can help us continue our work by becoming a patron at patreon.com/bookofhours. Join Rockfin or leave us a tip at rockfin.com/bookofhours, or leave us a one-time donation at paypal.me/bookofhours. Or you can use Cash App. Thank you.